Now that the dust has settled on the nail-biting presidential race, for the most part at least, we've been able to take a deeper look at how the election impacted core issues like the sanctity of human life, including the fact that the number of pro-life women in the U.S. House at least doubled. What does this mean for the issue of life in our nation and here in our Commonwealth? Welcome to Speak Up Virginia, equipping you to speak up on the life, family, and freedom issues that matter most to you. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candy Cushman, and I'm joined today by our president, Victoria Cobb. Well, Victoria, we have a lot to talk about today, but before we get started, I really want to hear the story about your daughter in her classroom and how this led to a really interesting conversation about life.
Well, they were studying the heart. And so the teacher was just playing a little game about 1, 2, 3, 4, trying to get the kids to guess at what those numbers represented with relative to a heart. And my daughter actually knew that at 3 weeks is when your heart begins. And being kind of the snarky, little sassy child that she is, she actually turned to her liberal friend and looked at her and said, and that by definition means it's alive. And I think she was trying to make a little point about life, which I was proud of.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, I know they say the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, but besides that, I really do think that shows how much more sensitive today's youth are to this whole issue of life. What do you think is behind that we're seeing youth, younger generations really leading the way, awakening our nation on this issue?
Well, think about, unlike when I grew up, they have seen themselves in color ultrasounds. My children have seen themselves in my womb on video that was not just black and white images, they were beautiful color ultrasounds. So I think they can't deny the science, and they've now been able to see it because technology has caught up. And they're also part of a generation where they've seen their moms outside praying at pro-life, for pro-life causes and at clinics. And so I just think it's a different generation, and we're excited about what they're going to do to change this nation.
I mean, isn't that amazing when you think about it? I think parents should be encouraged that you can really do education for the next generation. Just having that ultrasound picture on your refrigerator and having these family conversations. I mean, you can lay that groundwork for our nation. Just that simple.
Oh, absolutely. Every parent can have those simple conversations. It is actually, it almost defies human instinct to be anti-life because God created us that way. We know that.
Like your daughter said.
It's natural. Our kids know something's going on in the belly when their mom's pregnant with a sibling and they can feel it kick. They know. They'd have to deny that. And unfortunately, we know the abortion industry is working so hard to create those lies to counter what you really have to actually deceive yourself to believe.
Even at 3 weeks, a beating heart. And yet we're having these debates over 22 weeks. What's happening after that? So that just really speaks so powerfully into that. Well, Victoria, talk to us a little bit about what's happening with the landscape on the life issue post-election right now.
Well, we actually had a fantastic result when you look at what happened in Congress on the life issue in particular. We added 16 new pro-life women to the ranks of Congress, and they came alongside 11 incumbent women that are pro-life that were holding their seats. And so what we see now is they're going to be able to make that much more of an impact when Nancy Pelosi and that kind of effort to block all those pro-life bills. We saw it in particular with the Baby Born Alive Survivors Protection Act. That is a mouthful, but that bill is simply an effort to say if there's a botched abortion and a child is born, at least at that point, we're going to protect human life. And even that was blocked. So these women are going to speak from a place of motherhood and a place of femininity to say it is to be a woman is to be pro-life.
Well, that's the House. Tell us about the Senate.
Well, that's an even more incredible story because the abortion industry went gunning for these senators who were on the Judiciary Committee who confirmed Amy Coney Barrett. They thought if they threw a lot of money, they could convince people that what they did by confirming someone who has an originalist view of the Constitution and might relook at the life issue, that was bad. And they actually won despite all the efforts against them.
Let's talk for just a minute about the nomination, the confirmation of Judge Amy Coney Barrett. What do you really see for the future with that? What are you watching for?
Well, even in her own who she is, she defies everything the abortion industry has been telling women for years, which is that you have to give up your dreams to be a mother. And so you should just get an abortion if you want to have a career. That's what we've been told. And even in her own personhood, she denies that as her existence. And she is adoptive mom. So she herself defies that all that narrative. But then we also know she's going to look at the law. She's going to read what's actually there, look at that Constitution and defend the rights that are actually built in the Constitution, not ones that we've sort of fabricated over time. And then all this abortion law has come from that. And so I think pro-lifers have been waiting a very, very long time to just have a fair look at the life issue from our justices. And I think we're going to see what happens when that happens.
Because she has what they call an originalist
perspective. It just means we're not going to read stuff into the Constitution that we want to be there and be activists. We're not creating the law as judges. We're calling balls and strikes. We're looking at what's actually in front of us. And I think we would all argue that abortion was not one of our founding rights. And we hope that they'll see that when they get the first case.
Well, I think it's easy for us to focus a lot of times on all the bad news happening, but I'm hearing a lot of hope in this. I mean, this is really quite a significant silver lining here in this election. Despite all the other things that we're concerned about, we're making movement on the life issue, and I think people need to take heart in that.
It's the social justice issue of our day. I think the younger generation knows it, and I think we're going to see it play out in elections.
Yes, thank you, Lord. We need to all be praying for our nation. Continue that. Well, for those of you who are just joining us, I want to welcome you to Speak Up Virginia, brought to you by the Family Foundation. If you'd like more information about us or want to learn more about the issues we're talking about today, be sure to check us out at familyfoundation.org. That's familyfoundation.org. Well, Victoria, as we're talking about the whole landscape on the life issue, let's take a moment to just look at Virginia here. What should Virginia voters really be thinking about on the life issue in the months ahead?
Well, we need to understand that for Virginia, whereas a lot of states had elections this year that included their state house, we didn't. That wasn't something we did at this November. It's something we do next November. So we're going to get a chance for a new governor and a new House of Delegates, and we need to know what our current situation is. And that is that we have a General Assembly that has a majority of pro-abortion folks running the show. And so what we saw is the moment that they got in office, they repealed pretty much every ounce of our pro-life laws. And that was devastating. That's everything from safety standards to informed consent even all the way back to a law that was put into place in 1975 that simply said, if you're a woman and you're going to undertake an abortion, you at least deserve a doctor to be involved in the process.
And they're not done yet. We have more stuff coming down the pipeline.
Yes, we hope people will pay close attention to what happens in this General Assembly session, because we are expecting, based on what we saw last year, that they are going to come forward with an amendment to our Constitution. So they put an initiative that says, we want to change the Virginia Constitution to say that we're going to guarantee the right of an abortion, and more than that, ensure that there are absolutely no restrictions that can be allowed in future laws.
Well, Victoria, I know you feel so passionate about this because as a mom with 4 kids, I mean, this whole idea of unlimited abortion now, I think sometimes people say this is supposed to sound positive, but help us understand why a law, guaranteeing a right to unlimited abortion, how is that actually demeaning to women?
Abortion exploits women every time. It is telling women a lie that says this is a problem, that pregnancy is a problem, that children are a problem, not a blessing, and that somehow abortion is going to be a solution. And every single time it harms women. You meet the women who regret their abortions. You have their stories and you think, wow, if only we had been able to wrap support around them so that they felt like this was something that they could be supported in and actually could handle. But the abortion industry is just selling a lie to women, and it ultimately can be the most devastating thing. Even the men, they regret lost fatherhood. And people don't even think about that, but that is a true thing when women and men go through this issue of abortion. There's a loss. We know it. You know it when you have a miscarriage, when you have a child that's wanted, and society seems open to accepting that idea. But yet when it's an abortion, we pretend that that's not a real loss.
Yeah. And just making it unlimited, no restrictions whatsoever. I mean, that really just treats women like their womb is some kind of manufacturing. There's no really respect for them or the child.
No, we're choosing the abortion industry profits over the health and safety of women. The idea that you should get repeated abortions, the idea that you should ever be in a facility that doesn't meet basic safety standards. We wouldn't go through any other surgery without a doctor. It's just basically saying we're going to do whatever we can to increase profits for groups like Planned Parenthood at the cost of a woman's life, dignity, and health.
And just to emphasize, I mean, it's really not protective of the woman. What we know about today with sex trafficking, with women that can be, in a really exploitive situation, that is not protective at all. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Well, yeah, and even the coerced abortion issue. So coerced abortion, we know so many abortions take place. Not the abortion industry will tell you it's about the woman making this decision and her doctor. In most cases, it's actually because her boyfriend or whoever's around her is actually pressuring her, saying they're not going to support her, or it's a human trafficking situation, or it's a rape, and we're covering up a crime that needs to be exposed.
So what can people do to help get this truth out? Because I think they feel like a lot of times that their voices are drowned out, but they feel that to their heart like you do. What can the people do that are listening to really get this truth out about what's really at stake here?
Well, we talked about talking with your kids, basic life conversations, but it's also about talking to your friends and neighbors, having these conversations. It's in the news enough. There are ways to talk about it. So it's about being willing to share what you know, being willing to share the stories of women that you know that have suffered under the hand of an abortion industry. And it's about connecting with your legislators so that they can make a dent when their moment, they're going to have an up-down vote on pro-life or pro-abortion legislation. And we need them to know that there's a pro-life community standing behind them watching that vote.
So what can they do if they go to familyfoundation.org? What are some tools there to help them add their voice to this?
Well, we want them to join our new Speak Up initiative. That is our grassroots effort to build local community groups that can really make a difference. We believe your voice is effective when you meet with your legislator, when you send that one email, but imagine how much more effective when we pair it with other voices, when we put them together to make a stronger impact. So that's what we're trying to do, is just simply connect you in tangible, meaningful ways to other people and then connect you to the process.
Perfect. I think that's really going to encourage people today. Thank you so much. Well, as we wrap up today's show, we want to introduce a fun little feature. And I say fun in the sense that sometimes you just got to laugh or you're going to start crying. So what we're going to talk about is how we see these examples of just lunacy, just craziness, when we see our cultural leaders making decisions or trying to give guidance totally divorced, totally apart from biblical principles and really God's natural law. And so what we're going to do, we're going to call this the Liberals' Most Inconceivable Award.
Inconceivable!
And we're going to actually put together a top 50 list that we'll make available to you. But Victoria, who is today's nominee for the Most Inconceivable Award?
Well, I think we have to go back to the Amy Coney Barrett nomination process and the comments made by our favorite, Senator Chuck Schumer. He'll probably win this award a few times, to be honest. But he made the most ironic comment when you think about how abortion-minded he is and what pro-lifers wanted out of her nomination. He basically made the comment that generations yet unborn will feel the consequences of that confirmation. And we would say, yes, they will, because they'll be here. But let's go ahead and listen to his actual clip.
At this late hour, at the end of this sordid chapter in the history of the Senate, the history of the Supreme Court, my deepest and greatest sadness is for the American people. Generations yet unborn will suffer the consequences of this nomination.
All right, well, after we've done a few of these inconceivable awards, we want you to be part of this process because we're going to be making, like I said, the top 50 list available where you can download it off our website. So I want to let you know you can participate by sending an email to speakupradio@familyfoundation.org. That's speakupradio@familyfoundation.org. Be sure to send in your nominations. Thanks for joining us for this week's Speak Up Virginia, brought to you by the Family Foundation. Visit us at familyfoundation.org. That's familyfoundation.org. See you next time. And don't forget, we are stronger when we speak together.